Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the positive side of incarceration, or breaking the revolving door syndrome. And of course, we're fortunate to have with us this morning to talk about the positive side of incarceration and how we might break the so-called revolving door syndrome, Pastor Kevin Walker. And of course, Pastor Walker is not only a pastor, but he's also the president of the New Beginnings organization, which is an inmate organization that is located within the River Bend maximum security facilities at Nashville, Tennessee. And of course, Reverend Walker, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Well, thank you, Dr. Haney. I'm glad to be here.
And to tell you how glad we are to have you here, because we've had you on a number of occasions, and each time you bring us excellent information, and especially the kind of information that is not always readily available. Because I think, as you admitted yourself, that when a man is incarcerated, we follow him all the way up to the prison door, and then we forget about him. And so that's what we want to do today, to remember those individuals that are incarcerated, and to perhaps have you to give us some information that might keep others from following them into that situation. So, but before we get into that, Reverend Walker, let's talk about you.
Okay.
For those of our audience who might not know you, to have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to where you are, and then we'll talk about incarceration.
All right. Well, Dr. Haney, I was born and raised here in Nashville, Tennessee, of course, and I guess my educational background, Dr. Haney, I did a little studies at Tennessee State University at the time, back in 1975. At that time, I became a drug addict while in college, and from there, I became an inmate because of my drug addiction led me to crime and all of that type of thing. And I ended up in the system. My education, basically, I got most of my education from the streets of Nashville, and therefore, because I've gone through the system and experienced a lot of things, drug addiction, drug selling, crime, and all of those types of things, and God has redeemed me and saved me from that lifestyle. Now I have a passion in my heart to go reach out and to help people to, one thing, prevent them from going into that way of life, and then also to help those that have made that wrong decision and are incarcerated. So that's my passion. That's why I'm here, you know. And I'm the president of the New Beginnings organization, and it's an organization that was founded in the River Bend Maximum Security Prison. We operate on what we call the FUBU concept, you know, for us, by us, and that's what we do. It's formed by a group of inmates that corrected or resolved their errors in thinking, and as a result of resolving those errors in thinking, developed a desire, like myself, to give back to society the things that we have taken away from society, and to, of course, redirect the thought processes of those youth that may, you know, make those wrong decisions also. So that's what New Beginnings is all about. We've developed a program within the prison system. It's a 24-lesson curriculum that lasts for approximately 8 months. We're state chartered, 501c3, federally licensed, recognized organization. So we're doing some things, and we're thinking in terms of expanding what we're doing and building up on what we've already started out there at the prison now. And we meet every Saturday from 12:30 to 1:30, weekly meeting, and it's facilitated by one of the inmates. Matter of fact, Brother Cedric Booker is our facilitator at the institution right now. He's doing a great job facilitating. And he happens to be a brother. I just had to say this about him because he happens to be a brother that was an honor roll student. I mean, enrolled students on his way to college with academic scholarships and the like, and made some bad decisions, made some bad choices, ended up with a murder charge and doing a 30-year prison sentence. Just to say that, to let you know just how easy it is to get incarcerated.
You know, let's talk about this whole fact of incarceration. I think that within the next minutes that we have in this segment, let's look at it from the point of view of those who are involved. I mean, what do you mean when we talk about incarceration? I mean, what does that say to people?
Basically, to break it down to its rawest term, it's locked up. A lot of people don't realize what incarceration entails. I mean, we follow the criminal from the crime scene to the door of the prison system. But what we don't see are the cages that they're having to live in and the types of conditions that people are having to live in. We get a wrong signal a lot of time being from the prison system. You know, a lot of people think that they've got TVs and radios and they're afforded all these luxuries and things in life, but that's so far from the truth. Prison is the most unnatural environment anyone can find themselves in. I was in that environment for almost 5 years of my life, and I know, exactly how that environment is. at any given moment, you know, you never know what you may face in that situation. So for somebody to be in that environment and then to take on to take the initiative to do something about correcting or resolving their own way of thinking, that's a plus right there. To live positively in a negative environment is a task. Very, very great task.
And so no matter how modern the facility might look from the outside and how modern it might appear to some visitors who might go to a facility, being incarcerated is a different thing between going there to visit an individual and the individual himself being incarcerated.
Absolutely, because you don't see it. You see the niceness of the outside of it, and it looks like a great place to be. But when you go inside, you see the cages, you see the chains, you see the being locked down for 23 hours a day and being let out for 1 hour a day. And you don't see all of that. People don't understand all that. Now, and I need to make it clear that in a lot of situations, people that have committed crimes, some of those people they really need to be there. I mean, because at the time I went to prison, I needed to be there because I was a criminal and I did what they said I did. But there are some that have worked on themselves and don't need to be there right now.
And that they would be that they could make a positive. This is what you're talking about breaking the revolving door syndrome, that these individuals can make a positive contribution.
Absolutely. Allowing these individuals to make that positive contribution is the issue at hand, because a lot of times when they go for parole, regardless of the institutional record, a lot of times the parole board, what they do is almost like they're retrying the case all over again rather than looking at the accomplishment that these individuals have made while incarcerated. So therefore, looking at the crime consistently after 10, 15, 21 year period of time, then you're not looking at the individual that committed the crime. The crime was done by the individual in that frame of mind at that time, but that individual has gone on to develop themselves in a positive and moral way, and as a result of that, they should be afforded the opportunity to come back into society and contribute to society. And I'm living proof that we do change.
And of course, to suggest that people don't change is really not to have a rehabilitation program at all. Is that what we're saying?
Well, absolutely, because if you're saying that, okay, these people don't change, then we've got programs, you got some kind of programs in place in the prison system. If these people going through the program, then you're not giving a lot of weight, you're not placing a lot of weight on the programs that are yet in existence in the institution. So you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
on
I
that?
understand exactly what you're saying. I understand exactly what you're saying, that if individuals who would like to come out and deal with and help other folks from following their example and to be able to do that, would have to be considered on the road toward rehabilitation. Recognize, and I would imagine that would be the most important thing about rehabilitation, is to recognize the mistakes that you've made and to try to change. Is that what rehabilitation is all about?
Well, that's what rehabilitation should be about. That's what incarceration should be about. Incarceration should be for the purpose of rehabilitation. Now, there's also an element of punishment there also. We should be punished for the crimes that we did, and a lot of the men accept that reality. But there should also be somebody should also be looking at the fact that rehabilitation is in the midst of the process. Now, if I'm in the system for something I did, and while in the system I'm doing something about myself so that I won't be the same person that committed that act, then somebody ought to notice that and give me an opportunity to practice what I'm preaching. And if given that opportunity, they will find that a lot of these inmates will come into society and contribute positively to society if given the opportunity to do so.
And so what you're trying to do at Riverbend is to give them an opportunity to convince others that they ought to have that opportunity.
To give them the opportunity, yeah, absolutely. The program that we've developed out there is the 24-lesson program. It deals with morals, it deals with vision, insight, hindsight, foresight. It deals with politics and government, economics, all these different areas that we deal with, covering these areas so that the person will be equipped, not just come back out, but they'll be equipped with some information inside of them that will help them walk, as a law-abiding citizen when they return to society.
Okay, and of course we're nearing the end of this first segment here, Reverend Walker, after which we'll come back and we'll give you an opportunity to talk about some other aspects of incarceration and this so-called revolving door syndrome. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is incarceration, breaking the cycle, the revolving door cycle. And of course, we are talking to Pastor Kevin Walker, president of the New Beginnings organization. And of course, Reverend Walker, we promised that we'd give you an opportunity to talk about what could possibly be done to break the so-called revolving door cycle of young men, young women for that matter, going to prison and then getting out of prison, and then you find out again they're in prison again and they're out of prison, the so-called revolving door syndrome. What can we do, and what is being done to break that revolving door situation?
Okay, what we find out, Dr. Haney, is that in society today there is a big roaring about people that commit crimes, go into the system, get out of the system, and then go back into the system. But what happens is a lot of things that people don't understand is, and we're talking in terms of recidivism rate or reincarceration, and a lot of those people that do go out and return back into the system, the bigger percentage of those people are people that have been paroled out of the system, paroled out of the institution, and they return back into the system, not necessarily because they committed a new crime, but majority of them are back on technical violations. And what I mean by technical violations, say you go out and you are under parole supervision, and you change jobs, and you go to another job, and you don't inform your parole officer that you changed jobs. That can be considered as a technical violation that can get you reincarcerated. And people have been reincarcerated. People go out and maybe get a dirty urine or something like that. That's a technical violation because you didn't meet the conditions of your supervision while out. So the greater number of people that are reincarcerated, that are involved in the revolving door syndrome, by their own report, the Tennessee Department of Correction, they did a report on felon releases between 1993 and 1999, and they found out that the bigger percentage of those that did return to the system were those that were released on parole, because you got different release types. You got people released on parole, people released on probation, and then those that maximize their sentences. Those that maximize their sentences have the lower reincarceration rate than those that are paroled out, as opposed to those who are on probation. So, and the reason for that again is the technical violation. Now, that's not to say that people that are paroled out don't go out and recommit crimes, but you have to look at some figures. From during the time of this report, from 1993 to 1999, 72,595 people were released. It was a system-wide release of all these number of people. Now, you got some interesting stats, and I wish I had the time to go through all of them, but just to throw one of them, felons released to parole, 28% fell within 1 year. So of 3,221 released in 1998, 906 of those people recommitted back to the institution. So, and within 3 year period of time, 55%, there was a 55% failure rate over a 3 year period of time. So the number says 4,000 out of 4,036 felons released in 1996, 2,233 were recommitted into institutions.
That was almost half of them.
Almost half.
Almost half of them.
And the bigger percentage of that, again, is
technical violations.
Absolutely.
Well, now, if technical violations is a problem, then how could you deal with that? Because these technical violations are supposed to be a part of the sentencing process, the parole process itself, which is to say that, yes, we are going to allow you to go on parole, but in doing so, you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when these, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s, these are the technical things that they have to do, is it not?
Yeah, those are
now,
the
how
things.
do you deal with that?
The conditions of the parole. Such as reporting on a regular basis, paying monthly parole fees and the like, you know, of course, staying drug-free and things like that. Those are the things that are required for an individual on parole. Now, you take an individual that's been incarcerated for 10, 15, 20 years. Now, that person does not know a whole lot about how to function in society. Now, he may be the most intelligent person you may run into because they've developed themselves within, but they have not
world-wise.
Right. They hadn't functioned out here in society. So they get out and they make little simple mistakes, like being in the wrong. I know a guy that was incarcerated 21 years, got out in the wrong place at the wrong time, got convicted of a misdemeanor. And they just shoved him back into the system as a result of being convicted of a misdemeanor just because of trespassing. Trespassing. And now he's back in the system, having to deal with the system, again, being revoked on his parole and all of that stuff. But you know, Dr. Haney, there are answers to this problem, to this situation where people go in and out of the system, and the answer comes in terms of programs, programs that can educate, programs such as ours, the Introduction to Resolving Errors in Thinking curriculum that we have in place right now at Riverbend, that we're hoping to expand into other areas, into all the prison systems. And then programs set up on the outside. We're in the process of working with some things, trying to network with some other agencies to try to put together some programs so that when people come out of the system, that they'll have somebody, they'll have somewhere to go into. Somebody can walk them through some processes that they're not familiar with when they get out in society, and to help them to go through these things, to help them to be responsible. You know, sometimes you say, well, you can't lead somebody, you just can't carry somebody, just hold them by the hand. But in situations like that, people need to be held by the hand because it's a brand new world to them. It's like a baby coming into a new world, into a new existence after being incarcerated all those years. You know, when you're incarcerated, Dr. Haney, they tell you, they tell you when to get up. They tell you when to go to bed. They tell you when to eat. You don't have the choices that you have. You don't know how to go to the grocery store and shop because you didn't have to do that. So you have to learn all these things. Somebody has to be there to walk you through the process. There needs to be some living skill training programs in place for people that's coming out. And that's what New Beginnings is about doing. That's what we're in the process of trying to put together. And that's, we're looking for support in that area also.
Well, let me raise this question here, Reverend Walker. It seems to me, as we get ready for this this minute before this break, let me say, and let me have you to speak to this when we come back. But it does seem to me that if we could say that more than half of the individuals who are paroled will find their way back into the system primarily through violations, technical violations, as you call them, wouldn't it make more sense in terms of saving state dollars to keep those individuals from coming back into the system on those technical violations? I mean, wouldn't it be possible for some other kind of program that could be worked out to deal with those technical violations without having them come directly back into the system? Is that what would that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense, Dr. Haney. When it talks in terms on the summary of this report, if I could read it real quickly, it said, in light of this and given the social and monetary costs associated with housing an inmate compared to the continued supervision in the community, it is clearly worth an increased emphasis and policy focus on interventions that work to keep parolees on probation.
Very good. And of course, let me stop here for this second commercial break, and we'll allow you to pick that up when we come back. And we'll be back with our audience following this short commercial break. You see what we mean? Thank you, and welcome back to this final segment of the show for today. The topic is incarceration, and we're talking to Pastor Kevin Walker, president of the New Beginnings organization. And of course, Reverend Walker, before we had our final commercial break, we promised that we'd give you an opportunity to speak to the cost involved in this whole process of sending inmates, persons who have been paroled, and sending them back into jail on what you consider to be technical violations and et cetera, and the costs of that to the state of Tennessee and the correction system. Let's talk about that.
Okay, now according to the report that I have here from the TDOC, it says, according to the Board of Probation and Parole's fiscal year 1999-2000 annual report, for example, the board estimates more than $8 million in savings to the state via successful progressive interventions that kept parolees from returning to incarceration. So there's some money that can be saved in terms of programs being in place to help these individuals. Now, let me share this real quickly here also. Further, time to failure is an important measure of success. We did 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year failure rates. Persons involved in a particular program, for example, may fail and be reincarcerated, but if that program is associated with a longer time to failure, it may be perceived as having accomplished something important. So what it's saying is that if a person is involved in a program, now, even though that person may happen to fail, because all programs are not, just foolproof and it's just going to automatically work and everybody go through the program is going to be successful. There are people that go through programs and fail even after completing the program on the outside maybe. But the thing is that if they go through a program, if they're out for 3 years and they've been out for 3 years, they apparently have been doing something right during that 3 year period of time. So if they do fail, that's still a measure of success in that incident also. So, which further substantiate the need for programs. You can't say, well, you can't do these programs because they won't work. If a person comes out and goes through a program and he don't reoffend, because they say that most people reoffend within 15 months after their release. That's going to reoffend. So if this person can go for 3 years, then and without reoffending, then there is a measure of success in that program, which again further substantiate setting up program and the state rallying behind. We need the parole board to identify, recognize the New Beginnings organization as that program that's going to come in and help solve some of the problem, not all of it, of this revolving door syndrome. We are putting ourselves in position to impact these figures, to bring these figures down. We want a program that will not fail, but we know that there will be failures because people will come in for whatever reason and won't make it. But those that do make it, that's what we want to measure it by.
Well, let me raise this question here, because you continue to talk about programs and incarceration, et cetera. Do you believe, are you saying that for the most part there's a reluctance on the part of the correction system to invest in these kinds of programs, even though it might be said that, according to your report, that we might be able to save the citizens of the state of Tennessee millions of dollars just by having programs? And certainly these programs will not be that expensive. They don't cost that much, do they? Especially
if you're gonna have a nonprofit organization that's gonna come in and operate the program at no cost to the state. Only thing we're asking the state for is to allow us the opportunity to come in, utilize the state facilities that they're already there, and put our programs inside these various institutions throughout, so that those people can go through. We're trying to do a phase 1, phase 2, and a phase 3 MBO, maybe even another phase. We've got blueprint for housing, that we're talking in terms of building. We want to implement a program where maybe 6 weeks before someone goes out, they can enter into that program and then phase out into our program, to be furloughed out, to be transported to facilities that outside the institution to train them once they reach the minimum security status, and allow us to come in and to implement program. Give us a day of the week, give us some hours, give us some time to come in and set up our program and operate our program at no cost to the state.
Reverend Walker, over the last 2 minutes here, let me raise this question then. What can people do to assist you and the New Beginnings organization in trying to at least convince somebody that these programs are almost cost effective, and that there's a great possibility of them succeeding and thereby saving the state some money? I mean, what can people do? What can you tell our audience that they can do to help you and others this morning in doing that?
We're looking for people that have the ability to perhaps maybe, write grants, do some research into different areas to help us come up with some stats to partner with us to get this thing done. We're looking for people that may have had people that was incarcerated in the system that are doing well, that can say, yes, you're right, people do change, they do well. We need those type of people to come forward to rally behind us. And of course, they can get in touch with us at 298-3591, or you can call 969-0725, and either number you'll get directly in touch with me. Right now, offices are set up in my home. That's where we're set up. We need office space and the like to get this thing up and going. We just need people that come with information, with knowledge, that can help us network NBO and make it a household word.
Very good. And of course, let me thank you, Reverend Walker, over the last 30 seconds that we have here, for coming by and giving us that information. We are especially encouraged by what you said about incarceration, because we certainly didn't know that it was the problem that you're pointing out here, that folks are actually released and then reincarcerated, and on many technical kinds of things that helps to raise the whole cost of the correction system for the citizens of the state of Tennessee. And I think that we're interested in anything that can lower that cost. And of course, let me thank you for coming by and giving us that information. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.